Thank you very much indeed for joining us here. My name is Souad Ali. I am the founding chair of the ASU Council for Arabic and Islamic Studies. I'm the director of the Arabic Studies program and head of classics and Middle Eastern Studies and associate professor of Middle Eastern Islamic Studies and Arabic Literature in the School of International Letters and Cultures, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences here at ASU. We welcome you all. This lecture series is part of the initiatives of the Council. And this is our second lecture for the semester. We have 2 lectures every semester. And we are very happy to have our distinguished speaker, Dr. Sophia Pandya from the University of California, Long Beach. I will introduce her in a minute. Before that, I'd like to give you a brief just introduction about the Council for Arabic and Islamic Studies, especially for those who are joining us for the first time. And so the Council for Arabic and Islamic Studies was established at Arizona State University to acknowledge the significant contributions of Arabic studies and Islamic civilization and cultures to the world at large, both historically and in the modern age. Reflecting on the rich diversity of both Arabic studies and Islamic studies, the interdisciplinary program of the Council integrates the study of and research in Arabic and Islamic studies and culture in diverse regions, such as the Middle East, including the Arab world, Turkey, Iran, as well as Islamic studies in regions beyond the Middle East and Africa, in countries such as Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Muslim majority countries. The program promotes the teaching of Arabic, Persian, and Turkish, as well as other languages taught in the ASU School of International Letters and Cultures, including Indonesian and Hindi Urdu. The collaboration with the study of sociology, history, politics, anthropology, and religion are an integral part of the vision of the Council. And at this point, I would like to introduce our distinguished speaker, Dr. Sophia Pandya. So allow me, please, to do that before we give her the floor to begin her lecture. Dr. Sophia Pandya is a professor and department chair at California State University at Long Beach in the Department of Religious Studies. She is the winner of the 2016 Advancement of Women Award, from the President's Commission on the Status of Women. She received her BA from University of California, Berkeley in Near Eastern Studies and Arabic Studies, and her master's and PhD from the University of California, Santa Barbara in Religious Studies. She's a Fulbright scholar. She specializes in women and Islam, and more broadly in contemporary movements within Islam. Among her publications, her forthcoming book, Hizmet Movement in Exile, Refugees of Turkey's Purge, looks at the meanings refugees find or and construct from their ordeal and the role of faith in that process. Dr. Pandya is frequently invited to speak at the local, national, and international levels. Her talk today, sheds light on the ways in which Turkish refugees from the Hizmet movement process their trauma through their Sufi Muslim faith in the aftermath of the July 15, 2016 attempt coup in Turkey and the subsequent government-led purge. And she conducted extensive interviews towards understanding refugee-defined meaning construct. She interviewed dozens of Turkish refugees in Greece in the summer of 2018 and 19. And then when asked, they learned from what they learned from their experience. Her informant spoke of the prominent role of the spirituality played in coping with their ordeal. At this point, I'm not going to preempt this, and I'm going to give her the floor. Dr. Sophia Pandya, our distinguished speaker, welcome and thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me today to speak. We're having a storm in California right now, so I hope that the Wi-Fi holds up.
Okay.
But yeah, good. It's good so far. So thanks to Dr. Souad Ali for inviting me, and to the Council for Arabic and Islamic Studies. So I will be talking about trauma healing. It should say trauma, trauma healing amongst Turkish Hizmet refugees. So the July 15th, 2016 coup attempt killed almost 300 people. I think actually it surpassed 300 by after the date, and over 2,000 people were injured. And immediately after the coup attempt, you had the Turkish president Recep Tayyip Erdogan blaming the Hizmet movement, also known as the Gulen movement, for the coup attempt. Even before waiting for evidence, he, on the very day of the coup attempt, pointed at them and said that they were behind it. So I'm not here to talk about whether the Hizmet movement carried out the coup attempt or not. I want to talk about the refugees of Erdogan's purge. So in the aftermath of the purge, you saw a tremendous crackdown on the part of the Turkish government. So over 3,000 schools and educational institutions were forced to close. Over 150,000 people were fired or suspended. Over 500,000 people were detained. Over 100,000 arrested. And most of those were members of the Hizmet movement. Turkey actually is known for jailing more journalists than any other country. So after the coup attempt, almost 190 media outlets were shut down or taken over by the government. So Hizmet, which that word means service, was stigmatized and ostracized. And in Turkey, really, this has led to a social death. Many people left Turkey. Of course, tens of thousands of people left Turkey. So they were called FETÖ, the Fethullah terrorist organization. So even supporting this group it became a crime in Turkey after the coup attempt. So in the book that I'm writing, I have different chapters from the stories of people that I interviewed. I interviewed about 75 people. I have a chapter on hiding, another on jail, another on crossing the river, another on Greece, another on the insights that they gained. And they do, talk about the pain of fleeing, the pain of being a refugee, an asylum seeker. Many people spoke of losing their family, losing their careers, losing their identity, because for many people in the Hizmet movement, they were very proud to be Turkish. And to be told by your government that you're the enemy of Turkey was quite a blow for a lot of people that I interviewed. And people cried about that alone when I talked to them. The loss of Turkishness. So this is a beautiful image by an anonymous Hizmet refugee child, and you'll see artwork by these children throughout my presentation. You can see a few images here. You can see some symbols of the Turkish flag, right? Red, and then the crescent moon and the star. You also see children crying because they're also crossing, like this becomes a boat, right? They're refugees crossing the Evros River, also known as the Meric River, or maybe the Aegean Sea. Not sure where they're going to end up, and obviously in distress. So this was drawn by a Hizmet refugee child. So this is the inspirational figure behind the Hizmet movement. His name is Fethullah Gulen. He died last year on October 20th, 2024. And he's known by people in the movement as Hoca Efendi, or esteemed teacher. So the refugees, I should say that Fethullah Gulen's sermons in the years after the coup gave a lot of the people in the movement ways to cope with the oppression and the hardship and exile that they had to deal with. So I learned when I interviewed people that they found solace and inspiration in certain types of theological messages that Gulen preached about in his sermons. And of course, these were based on the Quran and Hadith, but also in Sufism, the mystical interpretation of his faith. He has several books in which he discusses Sufism. Sometimes people in the movement say we're not exactly Sufi, we're inspired by Sufism. But from my perspective, there's a lot of comparisons between Sufi organizations and this movement. And most of the religious communities in Turkey have Sufi ancestry. So maybe we should call them neo-Sufis. So there's certain ideas like gurbet, which means alienation, huzn, which means sorrow, hijret, sacred immigration, yolun kadri, destined path, imtihan, sacred trials or tests, and aktif sabir, proactive patience. So they all provided a lens through which these refugees in pain could understand the point of it all and process it in a positive way. What strikes me, though, is how relevant these mystical concepts are also for all of us, really, whether we're refugees or not. Some of these concepts, if you take away the religious layer and you just, like look at proactive patience or a trial, maybe not a sacred trial, just a trial, or alienation, some of these concepts they're relevant past this group. So Viktor Frankl, so here it's the slide that went with some of those ideas. You see gurbet, huzun, hijret, yolun kadri, imtihan, aktif sabr. And then in this image here, you see a little child drew this one, obviously younger than the other one, right? But you can see that this child's also crossing a river, trying to get to a happy place. Here's some more images by children. You can see that these children are wearing Greek flag clothing because a lot of the all of the people that I interviewed them in Greece. So the children were at schools meeting Greek children, trying to be friends with Greek children. Yeah. And here you see a Greek church, right, and a rainbow. So Viktor Frankl's famous narrative of his memories in concentration camps during the Holocaust sheds light on what motivates trauma survivors to want to stay alive and to maintain hope. Frankl found freedom in the ability to choose how you respond to a traumatic event. And he writes, "Forces beyond your control can take everything you possess except for one thing: your freedom to choose how you're going to respond to the situation." He argues that finding meaning in one's existence is a way to continue exercising personal freedom, even under horrific circumstances. Frankl quotes Nietzsche, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." In other words, the act of constructing significance from negative experiences may have restorative results, even though obviously this is dependent on a host of factors. Nevertheless, this idea offers an empowering lens through which to view and process personal or collective suffering. Here's an image of Viktor Frankl. Post-colonial theorist Edward Said also sheds light on the potential for refugees to construct meaning as a form of resistance. Writing about the tragedy of exile, he describes it as, quote, "fundamentally a discontinuous state of being. Exiles are cut off from their roots, their land, their past." He states, "Exiles cross borders, break barriers of thought and experience. Exile allows for originality of vision." And he goes on to say that some of the world's greatest artists, actors, authors were refugees and exiles. Apparently, he believed that exile allowed for a different state and a different perspective. So these different and very powerful ideas regarding self-determination within trauma, the potential of exile, prompted me to ask what the refugees had learned from their experience and in what ways this experiences had changed them. And this did open a space for a diversity of answers, some of which attested to the profound damage suffered, such as the inability to even trust family members. The answers also shed light on the resilience of the human spirit, with many expressing tremendous hope for rebuilding a future life. In many instances, the answers To that question reflected spiritual lessons or gains. Unsurprising, since the movement is held together by this unique strain of Sufi Muslim faith. So the idea of transforming suffering into spiritual gain is profoundly embedded in many religious and spiritual traditions, not the least Sufi Islam, widespread in Turkey. The great majority of Turkish citizens, whether secularists, leftists, Kurdish, members of the Hizmet movement, have ancestral roots in Sufism. And the Sufi mystic and poet Rumi, who died in Konya, Turkey, is greatly beloved by Sufis, and he writes on the spiritual value of pain. He writes, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." He also writes, "The cure for pain is in the pain. Good and bad are mixed. If you don't have both, you don't belong with us." And, dualism, this kind of dualism is really quite widespread in Sufism. You have the moth and the flame, and the drop in the ocean, the spark in the fire, the nightingale and the rose. And here you see, you have pain and light, right? Pain and sacred, or pain and spiritual benefit. So there's this dualism that I find very interesting. And I should also point out that sometimes when I was talking to refugees, they would say things like, "Yes, we've become so spiritually cleansed," and they would burst out crying and say, "But this is really hard. My grandmother died. I couldn't attend her funeral. I was an English teacher. Nobody's going to need me to be an English teacher where I'm going. And I have to start from zero. Everything is terrible." So the fact that they have some spiritual benefit obviously doesn't erase the pain that many refugees experience. And of course, that level of pain also depends on a wealth of factors, such as what kind of resources the family would have access to. So all Sufis share this idea, this sorrowful alienation from the world, combined with a yearning for a return to the beloved, or God, which has been expressed in so many ways through Sufi poetry. So Rumi also describes this pain of alienation. Listen to the story, and this is his famous poem, "Listen to the story told by the reed of being separated. Since I was cut by the reed bed, I have made this crying sound. Anyone apart from someone he loves understands what I say. Anyone pulled from a source longs to go back." So in this poem, the reed bed symbolizes human connectivity with the divine, and the human grief of separation from God is heard through music of the ney flute, created from the cut reed. So refugees within this mystical tradition then might conflate a yearning for a return to God with their yearning for their homeland, to which they cannot safely return, intertwined with their desire for refuge, safety, belonging, and community. Hizmet is not the first group persecuted for its faith, which then employs that very faith to process and work towards healing the trauma. For many Muslim refugees, culture and religion are intertwined, and both shape how they view their mental health. For many refugees, asylum seekers, displaced people in general, cite that their coping methods include reflection, relaxation, prayer, positive thinking, and meditation. That they do so, however, should not cause non-refugees to romanticize this experience. That displaced people have these coping mechanisms that include faith doesn't implicitly translate to recovery, deliverance, or any kind of happy ending. Fethullah Gulen himself he was influenced by a number of famous Sufi mystics, including Rumi, Al-Ghazali, Al-Qushayri, Bediüzzaman Sayyid Nursi, and Imam Lutfi Effendi, also known as the Imam of Alvar. He, or Gulen, has preached at length on the themes of spiritual alienation. Gurbet, the importance of practicing active patience, active sabir, of persevering on one's destined path, Yolun Kadri, of bearing one's suffering as did the religious figures of the past, of the sacred significance of hijrat or sacred immigration, and of the divine punishments for oppressors and rewards for the oppressed. He considered the tests and the trials, imtihan, as opportunities for spiritual growth and as tools to strengthen believers. Known as the crying Imam, he often wept while delivering a sermon, thus combining sorrow with spiritual learning and growth, prompting others to shed tears as well as part of their faith journey. Having experienced a feeling of alienation, Gurbet from the Arabic ghurba, caused by political and social turmoil in Turkey, Gülen was consoled by the idea that humankind can find healing from estrangement through oneness in God. So historian John Paul, who writes a biography of Gülen, writes, if one's beloved was God, he's explaining Gülen's ideas on Gurbet. If one's beloved was God, then the absence of earthly love was merely a transitory phenomenon. Eternal love made temporary Ghurba endurable. Unquote. So let the pain of this worldly alienation serves as a starting point, a test or imtihan to gain the spiritual strength. So Gülen also preaches that sorrow, huzn, can be transformed through hizmet or service into something called hoşgörü, also known as empathetic pluralistic engagement. So this sorrow can manifest as a collective identity, and it does manifest as a collective identity. And John Paul writes, quote, shared huzn forges solidarity, and this is a thing. So Gülen also preaches that Hizmet refugees should accept tests in life and practice active patience. He points out that passive inertia in this situation quickly leads to self-destruction, disintegration of the community. It's more beneficial, he argues, to be aware of one's agency. Even if you're struggling and say, here I am, I'll assess the situation. What can I do in this given situation? So God will respond, Gülen believes, for he, quote, he is the merciful, the compassionate. No one can compare with his greatness and compassion. And he refers to the value of patience as found in the Quran. So the Holy Quran states, we will certainly test you with fear, hunger, and some loss of goods, lives, and crops. O Prophet, give good news to those who are patient. So that's from Baqarah 2:155. It is stated that people will be exposed to many different tests. Then those who were patient with those troubles and hardships were given good news. Accordingly, as acts of worship raise a person's rank, so too, if the tests are considered as negative acts of worship are patient, purify a person from his sins and elevate him to the highest and highest ranks. Gülen also preached by his divine custom, and I'm quoting him here, God Almighty subjects people to various tests. Thus it separates the pure from the pure, like diamond from coal and gold from stone and soil. The Holy Quran states the following, Alif Lam Mim. Do the believers think they will be left to their own devices and not be tested just because they say, we believe? Thus, patience demonstrates one's complete trust in God, especially during difficulties and tests in life, a faith which Gülen argues is amply rewarded. His theme is repeated in a sermon titled Exodus, Struggle, and Patience. Here, Gülen preaches on the spiritual potential of the refugee experience and on God's reward for those who have suffered the path with patience. And he cites the Quranic verse, Surah An-Nahl 16:41-42. Those who immigrate to another land for God's cause after they have been oppressed on account of their faith, we will surely give them goodly residence in the world, and their reward in the hereafter is certainly greater. If only they knew how great their reward is. Those who have persevered in patience through all adversaries, and it is in their Lord that they put their trust. So Gulen's sermons, even before the 2000 and looks like I got behind. So here's his quote on diamond from the quote about separating the pure, from diamond from coal, and gold from stone and soil. Okay, so Gulen's sermons, even before the 2016 coup attempt, often touched on another spiritual concept, Yolun Kadiri. And that has to do with your destined path, that everybody's walking on a destined path. And on this path, suffering is transformed into a duty, a sacred duty. It's part of your path to serving God through serving humanity. So you have to accept your path. You should, and your path will benefit you in the end. So he writes, quote, "Everybody who wants to serve humanity knows that the duty is sacred. The journey is long, the roads are hilly, and on this path they will encounter various evil things. They will come face to face with death at every corner, and they will be insulted like a murderer or a vagabond. In fact, knowing well that they will often be deprived of their right to live humanely, they should still set out on this sacred path." Thus, while a seeker's preordained path, or Yolun Kadiri, involves profound suffering, it's the only true choice for those pursuing spiritual transformation, and one that has been well trod on by other religious figures of the past, including none other than the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself. So Gulen points to the Quranic verses, Baqarah 214, to illustrate that even the Prophet and his companions were shaken by crushing hardships and difficulty, and only by, I'll leave that there, and only after asking, when will the help promised by Allah come, would they be reassured that the help of Allah is near. So the Prophet Muhammad's fraught journey from Mecca to Medina also offers symbolic inspiration for all Muslim refugees. So hijrat, or immigration, usually refers to Prophet Muhammad's secret departure from Mecca in 622, when the early Muslims faced scorn and persecution from the Quraysh tribe, to settle in Medina to more freely spread Islam and consolidate the faith. But the trope of the Prophet's hijrat is deployed here by Gulen to highlight the pain of leaving one's homeland, but also to religiously justify a key component of Hizmet participation. Before the 2016 coup attempt, many in the movement had been encouraged to work abroad or carry out a personal hijrat, sacred pilgrimage, in order to offer service at the international level, but also to bring Gulen's inspiration of Islam and the values of Hizmet to a broader audience. After the coup attempt, additional waves of Hizmet participants were forced to flee Turkey in the face of possible arrest or rearrest. Gulen's sermons then could be understood as emphasizing the value and purpose of hijrat, and perhaps comforts and reorients those refugees who left without much choice. He preaches, quote, "It may always be necessary for at least one group to migrate, leaving their homeland behind in order to bring forth and represent the religion of Islam to different parts of the world. Therefore, a migration made in the way of Allah, whether it's done within the country or abroad, holds great value in the sight of Allah." Gulen has also highlighted the divine rewards for those suffering from oppression and the punishments for those who carried out that oppression. Referring to the path of the prophets, he states, "Throughout history, There have always been those who suffer and those who make others suffer. If those who suffer are walking on the right and true path, they are winning, and others are losing. It's been like this throughout history. The oppressor always loses. Gulen reassures those that have suffered displacement due to the purge in Turkey that they will be similarly rewarded in the hereafter. And he says, what you are struggling with here in this world will, in the next world, turn into a sweet tale as you are met with beauty and blessings beyond all visions, sounds, and minds. You will sit and chat, telling each other of these tales of the past. He also states, the Holy Quran says, we will certainly test you with some fear and hunger and some loss of goods, lives, and crops. O Prophet, give good news to those who are patient. Baqarah 2:155. It is stated that people will be exposed to many different tests. Then those who were patient with these troubles and hardships were given good news. Accordingly, just as acts of worship raise a person's rank, if the tests are considered hostile, acts of prayer are patient. These purify a person from his sins and elevate him to the highest ranks. So these words by Gulen, who also quotes the Quran, of course, inspired Hizmet refugees to construct spiritual meaning or perform other acts reflecting physical, spiritual, psychological resilience under pressure. His ideas regarding gurbet, imtihan, aktif sabr, yolun kaderi, and hijret, divine rewards and retributions, they all offer a fertile framework from which Hizmet refugees and those exposed to Sufism in general can draw in their search to process their experiences through faith. So what about the refugees themselves? We talked about, Viktor Frankl and his quote by Nietzsche about how people need to find the why to survive their circumstances. So in the case of these refugees, these experiences allowed them to realize what was most important to them. And that was very helpful. For example, Maher states, what keeps me alive is believing in God and family. We're the enemy of the enemy, but we love God. We love love. I feel this still. I just pity those torturers who tortured me. I feel sorry for them. I feel terribly sad for them. So people realized what was important to them, such as God, family, the hereafter, Hizmet, their friends in the movement, freedom, justice. They said they learned empathy, who their real friends were, how much they appreciated what they did have, how to be actively patient, and that Greek people were mostly kind to them. They did understand their suffering in those terms as an imtihan, as part of their yolun kadri, as something they could cope with active sabr. You see this image, this picture, which looks like 3 panels with a boat, and people in Greece welcoming the refugees with Greek flags and balloons and other happinesses. So this is the quote that I had already read by Maher. What he actually was tortured. I had to step away from his story. Actually, I had to go out midway when he was talking to me about his torture, because when he started to tell me that the police in the police station put a hood on his head and put zip ties on the back of his hand, around his hands, and were marching him downstairs, I just had to take a break. I went outside, I looked at birds flying around, popped some Advil, and then went back, and after about 10 minutes I could listen to the rest of Maher's story. So it is extraordinary that he was able to pity the torturers who tortured him. It's quite extraordinary. So Daria spoke of the people in the movement helping her cope and remained resilient. She said, we always have hope. We have a large community in Hizmet. We're all together here. We know who's happy, who's sad. We're a big family here. This big family makes me really strong. Sometimes you want to be with those who have experienced the same thing you did. This makes me feel better, and this gives me hope to help others as well. Hizmet refugees also spoke frequently of their conviction of their innocence and of learning the value and price of their freedom the hard way. So, for example, Layla A insisted, I never harmed anyone consciously. We didn't harm people. I didn't do anything that I regret. And Bashak also commented, I know we didn't do anything wrong. We're innocent people. The refugees also spoke of gaining other spiritual insights, such as learning that material things don't matter. And in fact, the material world was quite unstable for these refugees. So it's not surprising that they would lean on to the spiritual realm, which for them was far more stable than the world, right? For them, the world has just been turned upside down. So they believed that there were lessons to be gained from the experience and that they were experiencing a test. So Nurjan brought up the concept of imtihan when she recalled a friend advice that all that they had lost in this world was due to God just giving them a test. And then Zainab A shared, the lesson I learned is that bad things happen sometimes because this world is a test. I accept this. For example, in the theme of transcending the material realm, Aisha A said, we learned we can live with only one bag, leaving our house, family, country. Before this happened, we couldn't even imagine a life like this. Another common refrain was that the refugee experiences created spiritual gains such as greater empathy for other displaced people, regardless of nationality or religion. Many expressed disappointment with those former Turkish compatriots who supported Erdogan, or even with themselves, for having in the past been myopically focused on Turkey and Turkish people. Yesma pointed out that in Turkey they had a large population of Syrian refugees and they didn't help them enough, which she deeply regretted. Zainab A said, before this, when we heard a refugee ship had sunken the Aegean Sea, of course we were sorry, but we never thought that each person who died, had a family and children. We never humanized them one by one. We used to just focus on Turkey, what we can do for Turkey. But now we see how we can help humanity, not just people like us. Gamze B also spoke of gaining a heightened appreciation and sympathy for other refugees. When I was in Turkey, she said, I saw refugees like that, and now it's happening to me. I can no longer look at anyone like that. Everyone is precious. Everyone is unique. We should respect everyone. This experience taught me that as well. Sometimes refugees would tell me that they would look in the mirror and say, oh, that's what a refugee looks like, because this idea that they were a refugee was just so new that they couldn't believe that they had become one. Niloufer explained, I pray much more now than before. I learned how to pray. I didn't know how to pray deeply before this happened. I saw our friends' problems and I realized I need to pray much more. So some, like Omer, found a silver lining in their experiences, a measure of spiritual gain. And he said, physically, the jail was a very, very bad experience. Um, On the other hand, it was a positive spiritual experience. Our life was like Hoja Effendi, and that's that title given to Fethullah Gulen by his followers. We could pray and read the Quran. We could do whatever we wanted in terms of piety and devotion. It was like a 40-day retreat. So some observant Turkish Sufis take part in a 40-day spiritual retreat known in Turkish as Halvet. And by the way, many people that had spent time in jail and also had spent time hiding from the authorities in Turkey told me that it was much easier to be in jail than hiding, because when you're in hiding, there's constant terror of a knock on the door. And in jail, at least you know where you are, right? At least you know nobody's going to knock. So Chetin conveyed, We all suffer the same. When we see the pictures of the Greek babies that got burned in the fire, and he's referring to the July 2018 wildfires in Attica, Greece, which killed 104 people. So we suffer just as we did when we saw Turkish or Muslim babies sunk in the Evros River. It's the same pain. Allah gave us a test like this so we could build a better future with our own hands. Currently, we're experiencing a profound level of cruelty, yet this enables us to build a better future for the world. It creates a bridge for us to be able to do that. So many refugees maintain a proactive stance, reflecting this concept of active sabir, proactive patience. So despite that chaos surrounding them, some pointed to plans for relaunching themselves in their new host country. So Aisha shared, I want to learn the language when I get to the Netherlands. I want to talk to my neighbors. I want to be helpful in whichever country accepts us. Bashak also stated, our goal is to help people. We're trying to help everyone to have a better life. I try to motivate myself. I try to go to I go to therapy because my children need me. I learned that life is hard. But if I perform good deeds in life, God will help me, and my good deeds will not be erased. My faith helps me manage. God never leaves us alone. This belief makes us stronger. Likewise, Abdullah explained, I was inspired by Fethullah Gulen by the idea that you should cope with violence without being violent. Others conveyed to me that their experience allowed them to walk the path of destiny, Yolun Qadri, such as Hilal, who said, I learned loneliness. Hajar, Abraham's wife, now I understand her situation. I read about her, but now I have more empathy for Hajar. Nurjan, for her part, said she was better able to understand the Quran in jail. She explained, I read different prophet stories and I thought their stories were like my life. Outside of jail, I wasn't able to do this in the same way. So once again, nobody said that they enjoyed being purged from Turkey. That would be absurd. However, many were able to positively reframe aspects of their plight in a way that helped them better understand their faith and that helped them process and cope with what they were enduring. So these concepts were of such inspiration to the refugees that I interviewed, and interestingly, they resonated with me when I consider my own life problems. I just thinking of this idea of passing through tests, being actively patient and not just sitting at the sidelines, living through the things that other people had already gone through. I also found those to be profound, really. And when we think about Viktor Frankl's argument that if you can create meaning from the trauma that you have in life, it helps you survive them. As he noticed that those who survived the Holocaust were able to do. I think these ideas transcend the refugee experience. And that's what I found interesting, just personally interesting as I did this research. So I interviewed these refugees. So you've got Walter Bradford Cannon, who describes the fight or flight response. And he talks about those physiological processes that we're all familiar with. And it's our lizard brain activated, right? When you have an impulse to be instinctual without discipline, we're reactive beings. Our tiny region on the back of our brain, the hypothalamus, sets off an alarm, and that releases tons of adrenaline. And if it happens a lot, actually, we can be depressed, and we can have anxiety, heart disease, impairment of memory, concentration. It can actually suppress our use of judgment. So according to the Mayo Clinic, humans are hardwired with this fight or flight response. So how can we escape this negative cycle, which appears to be so hardwired into us as human beings, and of course not just human beings? So Sufi Muslims, like those in the Hizmet movement, Sufism offers some of the tools, such as this idea that you can purify your soul through self-discipline. And you have the quote by Rumi here: "The lion who breaks the enemy's ranks is a minor hero to the lion who overcomes himself." So it's this idea that you have to discipline your mind as part of the greater jihad. So the greater jihad, Muslims believe that there's a lesser jihad and a greater jihad. The greater jihad creates space inside the individual for God's will to be remembered. So Gulen writes, eliminating evil through goodness, loving love, and being in a constant struggle against feelings of enmity are as sweet to them as the whisper of their own soul. And he also writes, only those who overflow with love will build the happy, enlightened world of the future. So while Gulen highlights tools for self-discipline and spiritual reframing of trauma, parallels can be found in many other traditions, of course. And so this idea of imtihan, it becomes like, what doesn't kill me make me stronger. Every cloud has a silver lining. Gulen reminds us to reframe a negative to find a positive, to learn, grow, and find meaning in our life experiences, to let go of hate, anger. These greater forces will enact divine justice when we cannot. So in secular terms, Yolun Qadri becomes this concept of fate. Also in walking in the footsteps of other inspirational figures, maybe secular figures, right, who also suffered but survived. Active sabr is just be proactive and strategic, even when you're experiencing in a crisis. It doesn't help us to survive if we wallow passively or if we behave reactively. So while these ideas may have found resonance in other traditions, Gulen's mystical expression of these is particularly beautiful and did help many of the people that I interviewed cope. So in conclusion, Gulen's servants have included many fertile concepts for those seeking to understand why they were experiencing oppression and exile, how to navigate such trials. These included gurbet, alienation, huzun, sorrow, hijret, sacred immigration, yolun qadri, destined path, imtihan, sacred trials or tests, active sabr, proactive patience. Many Hizmet refugees I interviewed found tremendous comfort, guidance, significance in these ideas, which helped them survive their crisis and their ordeals. So this paradigm of finding meaning in pain has the potential to help us all when in crisis. Some of these ideas. And as Viktor Frankl points out, we might not have control over what's happening to us, but we have freedom to choose how we will respond. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Sophia Pandya, for this very insightful talk and speech about Sufism, healing, and trauma within the Turkish Hizmet. And it is very interesting. I'm going to open it up for a discussion in a minute, but I just wanted to, the parallels that we see, all refugees, they suffer the same. The problem would be if it's the immigration, if it is forced immigration, like the people of the Hizmet, or if it is a voluntary immigration, such as the pioneers who came to the U.S. and for the American dream. Or at this point, we are all refugees, forced out of our countries, and and just exactly like what's happening to the Turkish immigrants that you interviewed and spoke about. Sufism is very interesting to me as well, as I teach it, and grew up in a very Sufi. Both my parents were very Sufi in the Tijaniya path and the Khatmiya path back in Sudan. I mean, we've been here now 30 years, but I grew up in in that atmosphere. So as you spoke about, the concept of غربة وامتحان and these they just bring to mind the concepts and stages of Sufism, all of them, like sabr, which is patience, peace,
Yeah.
faqr, poverty, and the, purifying of the soul, and so these people are very much into that. Now, if we look at the Golan Height, the Golan movement, Fatah Golan, we see that from seeing some of them, their members in the U.S. Education was their main, thing, and they have those free sometimes schools, and so they've very much focused on education before the crackdown on them that happened. That you see the focus on education as well as in other aspects of. Community work and I attended several of those at the point. Now, a question for you, Sophia, Dr. Sophia Pandya. Now, when the movement was accused of the military coup in 2016, and Recep Erdogan, cracked down on them, and I'm not sure if there was evidence that they really tried or were behind the coup. And now, if we see Turkey, I mean, I can't help but compare Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, who founded, the republic after the Ottoman Empire, 1924, and secularism. And now Erdogan claims to be secular, but he is very much into religion as well. And now we look at Sufism and the very Sufi path and peaceful path of the Hizmet. So how can you compare those very interesting images between the three stages?
The three stages. What's the first stage? So I've
The
got
first one was Mustafa Kemal Atatürk.
and then
When he
Erdogan, and then Gulen, right?
yes, abolished he abolished the caliphate and established the republic, and then Erdogan, and then Fathallah, movement.
Yeah. Okay, so Ataturk also in 1925 abolished the Sufi orders, which forced them underground, as you know, which is probably why the Hizmet movement sometimes says we're not Sufi. Also, why Said Nursi, a forerunner to Fethullah Gulen, also said, I'm not a Sufi," even though both of their ideas, Gulen's and Said Nursi's ideas, are profoundly Sufi in nature, but
Yeah.
Sufism was not allowed, right? It's not allowed. So you have, I mean, it is interesting to think about because in all three cases you've got a man, right, who inspires profound loyalty. Okay, so this is a thing that goes on in Turkey that you've got people that choose to follow someone and very in a very very loyal way. So Ataturk's secularism was also, some would say, religious in nature because, there were so many rituals surrounding his figure, and you couldn't insult Ataturk, you couldn't insult Turkishness, you still can't insult Ataturk or Turkishness. You can't when people come to visit Turkey, like important people, they go and visit the tomb of Ataturk, and there's special sayings, almost like hadith literature of Ataturk. So some of the devotion to Ataturk becomes quasi-religious, okay?
Mhm. Yeah.
And then Erdogan began as saying that he would bring piety back to the public square, but in a safe way that wouldn't alienate the secularists, and then became increasingly authoritarian and increasingly Islamist. He's
Mhm.
a uh, he's a Naqshbandi. He comes out of a Naqshbandi Sufi strand or of faith that has some ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. So and his kind of Islam could be compared to like a form of Salafi Islamism. So even though he claimed to be friendly to the secularists, he's not friendly. I mean, they have become very well aware that he's not their friend, right? The secularists have already become disillusioned with Erdogan, and then you've got Fethullah Gulen. And of course, each one of these people has stages. So Fethullah Gulen began with some nationalist ideas. By the way, he began with some.
Yeah,
Thank
let me
you.
welcome Dr. Sara Risha, Dr. Faraj Hamdan, Dr. Neema Musa, Dr. Sophia. These are my colleagues in the Arabic Studies program and the Middle Eastern Studies program. Dr. Sara, go ahead.
Yeah. I want to say thank you, Dr. Sophia, for the very good presentation. And it really touching like our hearts. This is the feeling for every refugee and everyone who left his country. But it is sad to be in your own country and have these feelings. That it is double the stress and whatever they have. But you did very good. Thank you so very much.
You're very welcome. And I should add that a lot of like much of what I said is true for Muslim refugees in general. They just maybe wouldn't couch the terms in the same way, like maybe not active sabr or yolun qadri. They're not using the same words, but a lot of the concepts would be also tools to help them cope, because these are Islamic concepts.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes, you're right. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Dr. Sarah, Dr. Neema are Palestinian Americans. So you can imagine the experience they went through. Dr. Faraj Hamdan is an Iraqi American. So, by the way, Dr. Faraj visited Turkey recently. And I don't know if you would like to share any, thoughts, or Dr. Neema as well. Go ahead, please.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Sophia, for this lecture. Actually, I visit Turkey just like for tourism, so I'm just like enjoy the time there. But I have just like some questions about the research and about the lecture that you delivered today. There's like specific country, or there is different countries that's the Turkish refugees concerned there. So I see there is a lot of interview you did. So there's like one country or maybe. And the other question is related to the Fathallah goal and the Hizmet organization or itself. According my information or what I read before, they are very close to the Erdogan before just like 2 decades, and then something happened, and of course developed to be like crashing and more tension in 2016. So what the main reason? I know this is maybe different way, but what the main reason is look like political reasons. Of course, is not religious, because both they like God and they are worship same thing. But what the main issues? Also, I find that the Organization of Islamic Cooperation is about like 57 Islamic country. They consider and they classified the Hizmet organization as terrorist. So what's there? What the main issues there? So
okay, so there's really 3 questions. So the first thing is that because I couldn't interview in Turkey, I don't think I'm safe to go to Turkey because I've been talking about the issue. In fact, Cihangir himself could get in trouble for just like if this recording goes back to the Turkish government, he could get in trouble when he goes back in Turkey. That's how bad it is. Okay. So I myself don't go to Turkey. So I only interviewed in Greece. I went in 2018, 2019, and 2021. I skipped 2020, obviously, because the pandemic broke out and I wasn't vaccinated yet. And then so the second question is has to do with the movement. And so the movement's alliance with Erdogan was kind of a tentative, somewhat uncomfortable alliance because the movement was far more wanting to join the European Union, wanting to have a secular Turkey. They were, I would say they were more Western and modern, quote unquote, okay, whatever those two terms mean, than Erdogan. So they didn't quite agree, but they definitely had an alliance from 2003 to 2013, not 16, 2013. So what happened is two things. The Gezi Park scandal, when Erdogan clamped down on the Gezi Park protesters in a really authoritarian way and brought out the what was it, the water bombs and tear gas and all of that, suddenly the movement realized that that their values are not aligning with Erdogan's values. And then Erdogan's son, and by extension Erdogan himself, were swept up in a corruption scandal. And that corruption scandal also further alienated the movement from Erdogan. Also, Erdogan just started to become more and more conservative, saying things like every woman needs to have 3 children or she's not a real woman, and all bars should close in Turkey, that kind of thing. So the movement just began to move away, and then something else happened. That the final nail in the coffin was that Erdogan believes that it was the movement itself that uncovered that corruption scandal in 2013. So they believe that the judiciary, police in the movement uncovered that corruption scandal, and because because Erdogan believed that, could be true, maybe not true, I don't know. Erdogan began to close down schools, and started to, by 2015 he closed down the newspaper, Hizmet's newspaper, known as Zaman, and began his like a soft purge of the movement, which became a hard purge after the coup attempt. So why do 57 countries, as you say, I don't know if it's true, 57 countries classify the movement as a terrorist organization? And it's very simple, and it has to do with business that they have to do with Turkey. If you're in business with Turkey and you want to remain in Turkey's good graces, then you will say, you will go, okay, it's a terrorist organization, but it's not a terrorist organization. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have stated that people in the movement have been tortured, including sexual assault and rape. And I did interview rape victims and sexual assault victims in Turkey. So Erdogan has, right after the coup, suspended the European Convention for Human Rights, and his officers began to act with impunity against not just people in the movement, but also Kurds, Alevis, other people that they believed were against the government. But the majority of those that they are detained and arrested were in fact people in the movement. So the movement is classified as FETÖ because Erdogan is making them do that to continue to carry out business with him. And there's pipelines and things like that, right? There's serious money.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr.
Thank you.
Faris,
Thank you
Dr.
very much.
Sophia. Beautiful discussion. Dr. Ni'ma Musa, do you have any comment, or any of the other students or faculty? Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Souad and Dr. Sophia, for this interesting presentation. It's really great. And I feel like if you want to talk about one refugee, you're talking about, every refugee, especially I'm Palestinian, and see the refugees that, from Palestine, 1948, 1967, they are similar stories, and I liked very much the way you addressed the issues, the interviews, and especially the paintings of the children.
Yeah.
It was very interesting and a unique methodology. So I came a little bit late, but I'm wondering, how did you get these paintings? Did you ask them to paint, or did you collect these paintings from parents or from schools? How did you get that?
I asked children I met to paint, and in Greece there was also a leader of the movement, and I asked him if he could, have some sort of competition to collect these more paintings. So he did, and they tell their own story, really. You know, like I can be on track with what I'm trying to say. And when you're looking at when you're looking at the painting, it actually draws you into the children's stories. And I include the children's paintings also in the book my book that's coming out about this in February. And I'm really indebted to those children for making people more able to hear like what I'm saying, because it's so enhanced by what they're saying, right? It's so enhanced by what they're saying through their artwork.
Yeah, it is amazing because, sometimes people can, especially children, cannot express themselves. But,
Yeah.
through paintings or doing some activities, you can read them, what they're saying or what they're thinking, what they're feeling.
Yes.
It's amazing. Thank you so much again. Thank you.
You're welcome. And it's also interesting to look at Palestinian children's artwork. But as you know, that kind of work, collecting like children in Gaza's paintings, it's emotionally very taxing because it's so sad too. I have two kids that are Palestinian, half Palestinian actually, and they can't talk about it. Like, as you know, like it's very to talk about what's
Very
happening.
difficult.
Yeah, very
Yes.
difficult. So I also, when I'm done with this book on refugees, people ask me, will you go do another thing like this? And I think I will need a break. I need my own healing.
Of course.
Yeah.
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 And then Nema, you, Dr. Nema Musa, you raise your children, mashallah. Can you relate to, have they been painting or now? Of course, now they're. Abir is a medical doctor, Muhammad is a medical doctor, mashallah, and Amani and so on. So do you have, any experience related to this when they were children?
I used to paint when I was a child. So I was trying to teach my kids the same. Girls were very good in painting, but not boys.
But they did not experience what you experience in Tulkarm, right?
Yes, I'm from Tulkarm. Yes.
Yeah.
I was born and raised there, and I came here for education after I got married.
Right.
And, we stayed here.
And Dr. Sarah Risha, also Khalid, I don't know if you had any experience, and Dr. Faraj, Rose, and your children, did they have any experiences similar?
I love drawing, and I have some frames in my house and give it to my son when he got married. But no, he wouldn't draw anything now.
Yeah, my children feel that they have a radioactive identity right now, which kind of goes back to what Changar was saying, right? That you change your identity and
Yeah.
very confused identity. But yeah, for many Arabs, Muslims, and especially Palestinians right now, it's very radioactive. You feel invisible and also overly seen. I don't know. That's what they tell me. I won't speak for anybody else, but other than what my children have told me.
Right.
Yeah.
And thank you very much indeed. This is very interesting. Dr. Faraj, did you write something?
I just want to say thank you for everybody. Thank you also for my student also who joined us tonight.
Yeah, we appreciate all of the presence of the students. Thank you very much indeed. And Dr. Sophia, I just remember what you said about Rumi and what he said that the cure for pain is pain.
Yeah.
And that's what these people, all of these immigrants, actually have been experiencing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The cure for pain is in the pain. If you don't have it, you don't belong with us.
That's what he said, Rumi.
Yeah. And I think that that second part is interesting because there's a collective pain, right? That collective huzn that's felt that creates
the sadness, yes.
Yeah, solidarity, like a shared experience that was sad, but that you're processing together. And that you're hoping for a better day, just like Changar said, that you're hoping for something to change, that you're hoping for a new day, whether it be getting to Germany or belonging in Germany, or actually, your family is able to come join you in Germany, or actually just the whole thing is toppled and you're okay now, and you can even go back to Turkey if you want to, or whatever it is, that somehow you'll be more spiritual, that there's also something sad there, or something like when we die, we'll be okay, you know? And I don't know if that's sad or happy or both.
Peaceful, maybe.
Yeah, it's deeply philosophical and deeply spiritual.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what Maher told you, that it is his faith, Iman, that sustained him of the pain he was going through. And this is Sufism and the healing of spiritual healing and to heal the trauma. It's spiritual. And so, you know, this is really very, very beautiful. I'd like to see if anybody else had want to contribute anything, or yes, we just wrap up. If you feel you wanted to contribute anything, please, the students who have not spoken, go ahead and
Can I
okay.
add a comment?
Samra, go ahead. Yes.
Yes.
Zainab, is that you?
Yes. Yes.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How about yourself?
Good. Dr. Sophia, Zainab was my student. She did her master's in the English department about Elif Shafak, the Turkish novelist,
Yeah.
and postmodernism in Elif Shafak's novels. That was like more than 10 years ago.
Wow.
And she and her husband Ali are here now. They're, you know, in the US, and Zainab's from Turkey. Zainab, go ahead, please. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me know, even though I was
Very late. I am so
late.
sorry. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was able to at least make it to the Q&A session.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to thank you for organizing this. I think I strongly believe we should do more of this and bring voices to those people. Thank you so much for sharing their sufferings. I myself also witnessed, you know, and it's not easy, you know. It's affecting generations to come. Even when you are a refugee, you know, your children are affected the mostly, and especially after it, when you are refugee forcibly, you know, after a traumatic experience, your children, when you are trying to adjust painfully to a new country, you know, trying to make a living, you cannot so much care your children, and then this affects their upbringing, and it affects everything overall. So yeah, I mean, I hope the pain is healed through pain, as in our traditions, religious traditions. That's also a, you know, when we are giving the worst tasting medicine, you know, that's the most healing one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's also a medicine that serves as a medicine for many people. I'm not just talking about Turkish refugees, for all the refugees across the US. I have so many friends, like Palestinian friends from different countries. So I am so happy that at least in our traditions we have something that we can cling to.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it is very lovely. And some of the refugees actually, of course, they're also praying and, you know, telling their story to others, but some of them also are seeking out mental health therapies and things like that.
Yeah.
Because in some cases are too strong. Like I had one woman who had twins when she crossed, they were babies, and she didn't have diapers and they didn't give her diapers. So she had to wash like the plastic diapers, you know. She had to wash them. Plastic diapers, they kind of disintegrate. So I don't know how she washed them. But she said, when I interviewed her, she said, I'm no longer interested in my children. And then she started crying. And I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm no longer interested in my children. I have no money to buy them toys. They want things and I can't give them what they want. I don't want to be with them. And then she said, I'm only living because of them. I'm only surviving to take care of them.
And that's the real trauma.
That's
the real trauma.
that is yeah, very, very bad. But I think she also expressed a willingness to seek therapy in the future, and you know, I really hope she finds it.
Right.
Yeah.
And Zainab, Samra is your daughter?
Oh, yes. Sorry about all the children's
No, that's okay.
voices in the
And
background.
congratulations. I know that is it Samra that has been accepted at Boston University now?
No, that's my older one, Zehra. She will be going to Boston University.
And congratulations. And now your children were all born in the US, of course, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do they learn from your experience and Ali's experience when you were in Turkey and after the what happened to the movement?
I mean, yes,
You talk to them?
we try to teach them, like we definitely try to prevent them having like kind of a
Similar.
hatred towards their homeland, because kids are, sometimes mean, not sometimes. They are mean. They can categorize very easily, black and white. So
Especially when they were raised in the US.
Yes, exactly.
In a Western culture, yeah.
So yeah, just like in this country, like here, how we teach our kids, there are bad people from all the religions. There can be like people who do bad choices, and we try to teach them, to do the differentiation. So and like, stick with the good people around them, make friends, always reach out. So
Yeah, and the good thing, of course, like all our children, they belong to both cultures, and they're very diverse, and and they're very flexible, belonging to each culture.
Yeah, and their culture back home. I was just telling to my students this today, like it's very rich culture. There is like, just like, when you travel to Turkey, you should see it as a field trip. You should. There's so much learning involved. Like it's like it's huge. I mean, there is so much education that you can get, like just by visiting. Because it's between the words. It's like like the physical position, the cultural position, everything. It's like sitting in that diversity. So I just love it so much about Turkey, and I try to teach it to my kids, to my students. So there's so much, like Turkey is so much bigger than it's like government right now. That's how I see it. It's like it's a homeland that has great potential to bridge countries, like bridge cultures. It has so much history, as I said, so much richness. It's so
Absolutely.
eye-opening.
And that's why, despite what is happening with cutting on education programs recently here, the Fulbright program still provided us with a Turkish Fulbright FLTA, Cihangir, who's here now. And Turkish is a critical language. It is demanded by business, it's demanded by so many in diplomacy, and Cihangir is going to teach Turkish, elementary Turkish and intermediate Turkish in the spring semester. And by the way, I hope that you all, talk to the communities, if they want to take these classes, and we advertise for these classes as well. And at this point, go ahead.
Yes, I was gonna say, yes, that's wonderful. I can personally like try to reach out, to make the word heard about the class.
Thank you very much indeed. And at this point, if nobody else has any, addition, I'd like to invite Dr. Sophia Pandya to wrap up and, say final words, as we are running out of time. Actually, we exceeded the allocated time, but it's been a very interesting discussion. Dr. Sophia.
Yeah, I would just like to thank everybody for coming to talk to my talk today. I was really honored to be invited, and to point out the universality of this idea of transcending your suffering through a reorientation, right? You transcend your suffering through a reorientation of the pain. And it's not like you're ignoring the pain. The pain has happened. As Rumi said, the the solution is in the pain, but you
Yes.
reorientate the meaning that you find from the pain. Like, what does it mean? And I think what surprised me is how much what the refugees said actually applied to my own traumas and my own problems. And that I couldn't understand that for a while. I kept thinking, why am I so interested in this chapter where they talk about their insights? Why am I so interested in it? And then I realized because I also need to practice some of these ideas of active patience. Like active patience. That's just such a great concept, right? Yeah. So I think that as we heard from the Palestinians and other people here, that this applies to many refugees, not just the Turkish refugees, and it applies to human suffering in general. And it, like, of course, it's not unique, right? Viktor Frankl said it, first, and I'm sure many
Yes.
people said it before Viktor Frankl.
Right.
But thanks so much for listening to me, and I also want to thank the refugee children that drew pictures for this presentation.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Sophia Pandya, for this beautiful, insightful, and important, very important talk that you shared with us today. Thank you for your time, for your scholarship, and thank you for my colleagues and my students and all of our guests today for attending this lecture today and this talk. And we appreciate, we always appreciate it when you join us. And please follow up with the council's website to see other events. Now the semester is, these are the last weeks of the semester, but definitely we have more lecture series in the spring semester. We have a poetry series, we have a film series as well. So we invite you all. And by the way, we have the spring semester schedule is up. So there are many Arabic Arabic studies classes, both lower division and upper division, ARB, and the cross-listed SLC, School of Internationalism and Cultures. So please go to the schedule, and if you're interested, just enroll in those classes in addition to the Turkish class, which is SLC 194 for elementary Turkish and SLC 294 for intermediate Turkish. SLC is the abbreviation of our School of International Letters and Cultures. Dr. Ni'ma Musa is saying that she wanted to read your book.
Yeah, I'm giving everybody's hearts right now for their kind comments.
Who is your publisher?
It's IB Taurus. Also, it's what is it called? Bloomington, and IB Taurus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I just had my book with Emily Silverman, Subjugated Voice and Religion, came from Equinox in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, great.
It came in spring, in September. So we're very excited about that. That's my fourth book. So thank you very much indeed again, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Sophia Pandya. You have a good night.